for joining us on this webinar. We're going to begin by hearing some words from Michael Smith of Catholic Charities, Maine.
Thank you, Scott. So certainly want to welcome all of you to our webinar, Domestic Violence is Real, Implementing a Parish Response. And as Scott had mentioned, I am a member of the Catholic Charities USA PSM leadership team, and we are the host and organizing body for this webinar. Certainly welcome all of you to this important and exciting topic. And while I had all of you present, I just wanted to share a little bit about the leadership team as to who we are and what we're doing in for you as members of Catholic Charities USA. So this is certainly a committee of which we are really working to communicate with you. This is again a team that's very much bottom up, not a top down approach. So you may have noticed recently some newsletters that have come out, and this is our first of a series of webinars as well. We've been updating our website, and then we're actually really excited about coming out with some training templates, knowing that a lot of our ministries take place at a local level, whether it be at a parish or at a Catholic Charities agency. And so providing you with some of the templates from around the country that has worked well to be done at a local level that you can adapt and utilize in your own area. And of course, we're always welcome and available to talk on a one-on-one individual basis as well. So we've really done some assessments, and really you've been done the assessments yourselves in terms of providing us with feedback in terms of advocacy and volunteer recruitment and recognition, hunger initiatives, refugee resettlement, these being pertinent topics to you that we're really going to make sure that our webinars and our newsletters will really curtail to those interests and needs for you, and those will be taking place about 3 times a year right now that we'll be offering those. And those newsletters and webinars really dovetail each other. They'll always be on a similar topic, like the newsletter that came out recently on domestic violence. Now we're holding the domestic violence webinar. But we always try to provide a new flavor within each avenue that we offer you. So we have you on the line now. We're certainly welcome you to this. In the next slide, we have the topics that will be coming up just in the next part of the year, the legislative advocacy in January for the newsletter, in February for the webinar, and then we'll do some volunteer recruitment and formation in May for the newsletter, and in June for the webinar. And the next slide will share with you a little bit about how you can reach us in terms of again, certainly a way to just communicate through the email that we have there, and that gets to the entire leadership team, so to be able to share additional resources, insights that you have, or reaching out looking for resources that we might be able to provide you. And that is one way to also even sign up for the section, the Parasocial Ministry section, if you have not done so already. So I just want to share that a little bit with you and some of the exciting pieces that we have going forward. For the next slide, for our logistics of this webinar, as most webinars that folks have been on, certainly please mute your phone so we don't have any of the background noise available. There is that little comment section that you can type into, and you have questions throughout, and we have some wonderful folks at Catholic Charities USA that will field those questions and bring those to the panel presenters that will be able to answer later on as we finish up. And then, of course, I believe at the end, we'll open up the line as well for folks that verbally want to share their questions or some of the insights they have. And I do want to share that this is certainly a point in time in which we're doing this webinar. By no means are we going to cover all the topics that surround domestic violence in its parish setting, but it's something that we hope to start the conversation, that this can be sharing some of those resources that we have available now, but it'll be an ongoing developing conversation that we can continue on. So please do reach out. So before I go any further, I think it's apt that we begin with prayer. And Laura Yeomans, one of our presenters, was kind enough to pass along a pertinent prayer for us. So if we begin in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Gathered as the body of Christ, we are called to love one another and share in one another's sorrow and joy. Therefore, we ask our loving God, when we turn our face from violence and deny its presence, and we prefer to trap violence behind closed doors, may love call us to repentance. When stories of violence are shared, may we believe our sisters or brothers. When pain and fear weigh down one of us, may we bear the burden together. When we are afraid to speak out or ask for support, may we remember our community endures all things together and that we are not alone. And until we cease to witness violence in our lives, our community, and our world, may we remain ever hopeful in our ability to bring justice, healing, and peace to this world. May the love of God strengthen us. May the love of this community comfort us. May the eternal promise of love embolden us to not rest until we achieve peace in our homes. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
And so this time I wanted to welcome our two presenters, and we have some wonderful folks with Dr. Sharon O'Brien and Laura Yeomans. And Dr. Sharon will really provide some institutional knowledge within this field for us, and then Laura will really delve into some of the specifics in terms of the application within a parish setting. And so in a way of a little bit of a background, Dr. Sharon O'Brien serves as the Director of Catholics for Family Peace, Education, and Research Initiative and the National Catholic School of Social Service at the Catholic University of America. Dr. O'Brien received her doctorate from the University of Maryland and was recognized for it at the International Family Violence Research Conference. O'Brien was a founding member and president of the Interfaith Community Against Domestic Violence in the Montgomery County, Maryland, and is a founding member of the Peaceful Families Project. She has served on the State of Maryland's Interfaith Domestic Violence Coalition as well. Sharon continues to serve on the advisory board of the Jewish Coalition Against Domestic Abuse and on the National Council of Catholic Women, which has addressed domestic abuse for many years. And then our second presenter, Laura Yeomans, is the program manager for the Parish Partners Program of Catholic Charities in the Archdiocese of Washington, which brings services of Catholic charities to the local parishes. Laura is currently providing staff support to 2 parish service projects in the development of domestic violence ministries. Laura has had the opportunity to work in 2 domestic violence programs as a shelter director and as a family advocate for a domestic violence hotline. In addition, Laura has worked as a pastoral associate for Hispanic ministries for a parish in the Diocese of Columbus, Ohio for 7 years, where she coordinated a women's ministry to those suffering domestic abuse and violence, which was funded by the Sisters of Charity. So as you can see, we have 2 very distinguished presenters here with a breadth of knowledge that hopefully will be applicable to some of your work, certainly some helpful resources that can be adaptable. And again, the outcomes of this webinar is to begin the ball rolling, so to define domestic abuse and share church teachings on it, to identify ways to develop local and parish responses to it, and then again get the ball rolling with some additional ideas and resources at your local level. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Sharon O'Brien to begin her section. Thank you, Dr. O'Brien.
Michael, thank you. It's a pleasure. Laura Yeomans and I have been looking forward to this presentation, and to all the people who are listening, we are acting like you are right here in the room with us, and so please indeed communicate with us throughout the webinar. We have 2 questions right out of the gate, actually. We'd like to know who already is involved in the domestic violence ministry. Our colleague Fanny Cruz is going to put that message up, that question. So if you would just respond to that. And if by chance any of you had the opportunity to attend the symposium on domestic violence, which was co-sponsored by the Catholic Charities USA as well as USCCB and Catholic University of America, if you were able to attend that. So if you could if you could answer those 2 questions, that would be good. Great. And are you, let's see, people are telling us that 32% of you are involved in the domestic violence ministry right now, and 62% attendance. All right, great. Well, so this is good. We're talking, sharing with people who are most of whom are familiar with this issue. But by the end, everybody will be familiar with this issue. So indeed, as Michael said, I'm going to lay the groundwork about the definition, and then my colleague and dear friend Laura is going to help you build a response. So let's take care of this definition. Words are so tricky. So we say domestic abuse and violence. That word, that expression could mean a lot of things. For us, what it means is we use the Center for Disease Control's definition, and they use the term intimate partner violence, a perfectly good word. And intimate partner violence from a research point of view addresses 4 points. It addresses the physical aggression, the sexual violence, stalking, which it didn't used to 20 years ago, but physical, sexual stalking, and psychological abuse. We put a lot of emphasis on saying abuse and violence because we've found, and Laura might have a moment to speak to this later, that people in severe abusive situations, they think abuse is a black eye. Well, this psychological abuse, we have heard, and we know from years of research, psychological abuse is actually, saying worse isn't quite the right word because it's all bad, but psychological abuse is a very important aspect to consider. And on the Center for Disease Control, we'll send you this link about their definitions, but they do a very thorough job about explaining what fits under each of these points. But of course, as a whole, intimate partner violence, and we're using the term domestic abuse and violence, includes name calling and insult, actual hitting, of course, threatening to kill or harm one's partners or children, marital rape. At last, every state in the United States actually has a law against marital rape. I don't think that happened until 2006 or something. The stalking, withholding funds, there are a whole lot of things that are defined as abusive behavior. Basically, anything which, I mean, if we just listen to all of St. Paul's readings, so if we do the opposite of what St. Paul says, then it's abusive. That if we're not kind and gentle and considerate of each other, it tends to fall into that ballpark. And indeed, so if we can be clear about this, so when we say domestic abuse and violence, we do mean between two adults. We're not talking about sibling abuse. We're not talking about child abuse or anything else that, quote, could happen in the house. So for the sake of this this time together, this is the definition. So the church is actually, well, let me give you a few more facts. And again, we have the Centers for Disease Control to thank. They have been doing research for the last 40 years, so we know a ton of information about abuse and violence. And in the most recent national survey, we know that 1 in 4 women reported severe physical violence by an intimate partner, and 1 in 7 men reported the same. And severe physical violence is defined as what all of us would think of as severe: hitting, slapping, being thrown against the wall. So something that everybody in the room and on the air would agree. So 1 in 4, so it's 25%. I always forget what 1 in 7 is, but it must be like 16%. But then look at this one about psychological aggression, that nearly half of women and indeed half of men reported experiencing psychological aggression. I mean, wasn't it just yesterday Pope Francis was saying, we need to be kind to each other. Let's get on board here. I mean, just starting with being kind to each other would be a big help. This point is, well, it's startling. So when a mother cohabits with a boyfriend who is not the father of her children, the abuse rate increases to 10 times higher for physical abuse and 20 times higher for sexual abuse. It is, with all things related to research, it's important to realize there are many good situations, but this is an important point. And if you've not come across the National Domestic Violence One-Day Count study, I invite you to do so. It provides amazing information about state and county information, so you can look up what's happening in your particular area. So let's take just a couple minutes and do the background to the Catholic approach to domestic abuse. I interviewed a canon lawyer, which is just a church lawyer, and he was saying that the last time they revised the canon law, they included this particular canon that's going to be noted here, canon law 1153. He says, well, I mean, naturally for 2016 years, we've been against domestic abuse. One wouldn't think that you'd have to say that, but obviously we do. And so the church law is quoted right here. It says, if either of the spouses causes grave mental or physical danger to the other spouse or to the offspring or otherwise renders that spouse gives the other a legitimate cause for leaving, either by decree of the local ordinary, which is the local bishop, or even on his or her own authority if there is danger and delay. So we've always believed in family peace, and we've always been against family abuse, particularly intimate partner abuse. The fact that we've not screamed it from the rooftops does not mean that it's that we're not against it. And indeed, it's against everything we believe as Catholics. So the next, and that's a nice quote from Worrell. So in conclusion, for my part, then would be this last point. So we've made reference to Canon 1153. You can Google it, and you'll see lots of references to it, particularly in a wonderful resource which the bishops put out back in 1992. It's called When I Call for Help. I highly recommend it. On the very first page, it says no one is expected to stay in an abusive marriage. And then the other Catholic responses, it's very exciting what we've learned from the Extraordinary Synod on the Family, as well as the regular Synod, and then Pope Francis's Joy of Love, which Alvara will make reference to in a moment. We will, Bishop Malone did an amazing blog, and we will send that link out to you. I have the pleasure of working with a group of colleagues, and our website, Catholics for Family Peace, has a number of resources. And let me draw your attention to what our colleagues in England and Wales are doing. Their group is called CEDAR. It's Catholics Experiencing Domestic Abuse Resources, and domestic abuse is an international issue, and we are an international church, and you will find that website to be very applicable. So there's a very strong Catholic understanding that we are for family peace and against family abuse, and my colleague Laura Yeomans is going to lead us right into how to respond to it.
Thank you, Sharon. It's good to be here with you today. I'm thankful for this opportunity to talk with you about the wonderful opportunities parishes have to work with parishes, to work with domestic violence survivors who come forward in the parish. Again, I'm Laura Yeomans. I'm a program manager for the Parish Partners Program, Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. Our program, Parish Partners, brings the services of Catholic Charities out to the parish. So we have the opportunity to help build parish social ministries, to train volunteers, and to provide emergency assistance, including to domestic violence survivors. In 2014, Cardinal Worrell called on the Archdiocese, the parishes, Catholic Charities, to create our own Catholic response to domestic violence. And in implementing that plan, our CEO at Catholic Charities, Monsignor Ensler, created a vision that in each deanery, in each grouping of a dozen or so parishes, there would be one parish that has a domestic violence ministry. So the information I'm presenting today is part of a larger plan within our Archdiocese that includes, for instance, we've just completed a training for priests that Monsignor Ensler organized, and we have a new poster, And so there's some other outreach efforts. But today I'm going to talk more about the parish development that we've done with, and I'm going to ask to go back to the first slide here. I'd like to share with you a little bit more about the first slide. There we go. Good. I very much wanted you to see this picture. Part of our organizing work is at St. Camilla's, and this is a picture of one of their first organizing steps. A few weeks ago, a young woman was kicked by her husband, and he continued to kick her until she fell to the floor. And as he was kicking her, she dialed 911. However, he kicked her until she was unconscious. She couldn't say anything. The police came, though. They came to her home. The emergency squad came. She was taken to the hospital. When she got out of the hospital, she grabbed her baby, and she came to this parish, St. Camilla's. And because St. Camilla's has a domestic violence ministry, that young woman was warmly embraced by volunteers. She was given emergency food. She was given assistance to get diapers, a smart trip card so that she could travel. We connected her to the House of Ruth. We went with her to court. We saw her stand up in court and ask the judge for a protection order. And that young woman is in a safer place today because of this ministry at St. Camilla's. We're actually working with several parishes in the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. at this time, including Our Lady of Mercy, a wealthy parish in the Potomac, just launched their domestic violence ministry. We had over 70 people rushing back to sign that they were interested in supporting that ministry. Father Bill Byrne gave a special homily. We had table displays afterwards. There were so many people then who came. We had 40 people come to a volunteer meeting at Our Lady of Mercy. Now, my remarks today focus often on the actual formation of a specific domestic violence committee. However, if you're not able to form a special domestic violence committee, some of the work that we're going to talk about could be done by a social concerns committee, St. Vincent de Paul, Ladies of Charity, and in fact in the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C., we have 2 health parish committees, health ministries, that have incorporated domestic violence concerns into their health ministry. So as we develop a domestic violence ministry, this can be very challenging, but we have great encouragement to go forward. Pope Francis's own words in The Joy of Love give us direction. The verbal, physical, and sexual violence that women, and of course men sometimes, endure in some marriages contradicts the very nature of the conjugal union. The equal dignity of men and women makes us rejoice to see old forms of discrimination disappear. And of course then Pope Francis is encouraging parishes to develop our response in each community so that we can help families facing this difficulty. Now, developing a domestic violence ministry requires some special training and some special thought. It's different than some of the other ministries that we develop in the parish setting. If we are helping, for instance, volunteers move into becoming volunteers on the parish council or to teach a baptism class, we don't have to do safety training with them. They don't have to be community networked. But in a domestic violence ministry, we do need safety training. We do need to be community networked. We need to learn how to do supportive listening. And in fact, we need to become survivor focused. Thank you. So here we are. We want to establish at the very beginning that we will have a ministry that is survivor focused. What does that mean? We establish the intention that our ministry is going to focus on her or his concerns, the survivor's needs and their situation. Now this is kind of opposite of what we do. For instance, if we have a baptism class curriculum, we're actually telling people, Father's going to say this, then you do this, and we're directing people what to do, but not in a domestic violence ministry. I really love this photo. I wanted to include it in the presentation because it is a photo of one of the first homilies at St. Camilla's, where Father Mike asked everyone to listen to a survivor speaking at the foot of the cross. It's a good symbol that the ministry itself needs to be set up to listen. Because a domestic violence ministry is successful when we learn that the survivor's own self-growth is the critical factor. If we as volunteers or we as staff tell her what to do, she won't develop the internal strength to cope. And we don't know the safety consequences of our decisions, of our recommendations. So we shouldn't be telling people what to do. When a survivor comes to the parish, she's trying herself. She's trying to decide what to do. She's been beaten down, threatened, sometimes terrorized. Her recovery is connected to her own growth and her ability to make decisions for herself. I was sitting at St. Camilla's with a volunteer, and we were talking with a survivor, and after telling us about her abuse, she said to us, "Tell me what to do. My husband's in jail. He says he loves me. He wants me to pay his bail to get him out. What should I do?" And I was so pleased because of the training we did at St. Camilla's, and because of the internal wisdom, the wonderful wisdom of Lolita, who was with me at the time. She said to this volunteer, "That's not a decision for us to make. You have the wisdom to make this decision. We're going to accompany you and support you, whatever you decide." Now then, Lolita and I did talk with her about some of her own statements from before, where she had said she was afraid he was going to kill her. So we do bring up safety concerns, but we are listening and encouraging and respecting the volunteer in her own decisions. Overall, we have some goals for the development of domestic violence ministry, that we will focus on preparing clergy, staff, volunteers, parishioners to know much more about domestic violence so that they can recognize domestic violence when it's occurring, respond compassionately, and refer people to existing programs. And this may lead your ministry to have education and outreach services. It will certainly lead you to do training with your volunteers. It may lead you to offer additional services. Let's get started. Let's look at preparation. If you're preparing to start a domestic violence ministry, we've found that we must start with our pastor. We need his support and guidance and participation, so that's the first step. I'd recommend that before you begin a homily on domestic violence, or before you launch into the parish setting and invite volunteers forward, that you do some important preparation ahead of time. You identify key leaders. One among them will focus then on volunteer management, keeping the list of people interested, preparing a system to invite people to meetings and track people who are becoming involved in the ministry. I recommend that you begin training with key leaders before the official launch of your ministry. This is a really complex ministry, and it's so helpful. Sister Pat at Our Lady of Mercy, just I think last week, was saying, "Oh, I am so glad we did training as a ministry team before we launched and invited all the volunteers to come in, because people have so many ideas about what we should do next, and the staff and leaders there have already gotten some great training about what could be and what would be the best way to build a survivor-focused ministry." You'll want to do some education and training together, including, for instance, in both parishes I've worked with recently, we read Dr. Welland's book, How to End Domestic Violence in Catholic Families, a very wonderful book study that you could do together with key leaders. You can also take a look at a wonderful website with the Chicago Archdiocese has a domestic violence program. You can Google that, and I have that in some of my slides to help you get started. You're going to want to do some research. At Our Lady of Mercy, we're right in this phase right now. We have a fantastic volunteer, Myra, and a number of the team, the advanced team, have been doing research. Know what your local domestic violence programs are. Know what the Catholic programs are and what they've done. Look at what are the training opportunities that already exist at your state and federal level, and regional level, and find out what are the certified abuser counseling programs that exist in your neighborhood. This is the basic kind of background research that you need to do before you get started. Now, in our next slide, I wanted to point out to you that you have 3 fantastic websites that are going to help you learn about what Catholics are already doing on this issue. You can use these materials. You've got Catholics for Family Peace, which Sharon works with. They have wonderful restroom flyers. They have leaflets. You've got the Archdiocese of Chicago website. They've got homilies, videos, models of developing parish ministries in the Catholic Church. And you've got the website from my program, Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C., where we have a lot of resources and checklists and material that is going to help you. Now, as we go on, I wanted to also tell you that I've prepared a checklist, a couple of checklists for the parishes that I work with. So that's available for you to download on the right side of your screen or later as we finish the workshop. If you'd like to see a helpful checklist of things that you can do as you prepare to start a domestic violence ministry. And then on the right here on the slide, you can see a wonderful model from the Archdiocese of Chicago and their domestic violence program, recommendations of how to start a domestic violence program. So these will be key resources for you. Now, we're still in the preparation phase, and we're going to encourage you to think about your own community. This is a map that was developed in Erie County, but it's a very good example of all the kinds of services that might already exist in your neighborhood, in your community. So as you're developing a parish ministry, at Catholic Charities, we're often trying to focus on the most vulnerable, where the needs are not being met. And so doing a kind of mapping of your community is going to enable you to tap into the services that are already there. Now, at Our Lady of Mercy, Myra has done an extensive mapping. She's a wonderful volunteer in the leadership team. She's done a wonderful mapping of the services and created a resource guide so that before they officially launched in the church, they actually have a guide to the services that exist in the neighborhood. We had a parish that sent us a referral. It was a referral to care for an elderly couple. The grandmother was suffering domestic abuse at home, and when I talked with her, she said, "Help me, I need to get out. My husband has beaten me before. He's gone off of his mental health meds, and he beat me, and I had to call the police. He was taken to the hospital, but he's home now, but he's threatening me again. I don't feel safe." If this elderly grandmother was in your parish, would you know the elder programs in your neighborhood, in your community? So it's hopefully what you will do is what we're doing at Our Lady of Mercy. Myra and other volunteers are researching what are the resources for the elderly who are experiencing abuse. What are the resources for teenagers that are suffering abuse? What are the resources for domestic violence survivors who need a hotline, need shelter, need emergency services? So with that information, you're going to be able to make wonderful linkages when people call for help. You're going to be able to know which community networks, which agencies are actually able to serve people right now. We got a call one day from one of our DC parishes. They had gotten a knock at the door, and she was carrying a baby, and she said, "I am suffering domestic abuse. I need help to escape. I don't have all my children with me. I can't escape today, but could I please come in and use the phone? My husband monitors every call I make on my cell phone. Could I please come in? Can you help me? get in contact with someone. Now the priest and the secretary welcomed her in. And then they looked at each other and they realized that neither of them knew what was the local domestic violence agency that could help them. And so by encouraging you to do your community networking research first, I'm encouraging you to be prepared. So when that knock at the door comes, you're going to be ready. You're going to have that phone number. Now this parish actually called my team. We have a team of 6 that are able to help our one of our team members gave her the information, gave the parish the information, and connected this young woman to assistance. After you do a number of steps of preparation, you may have an opening homily, a special event to announce the launching of your domestic violence ministry. If you're going to do that, perhaps that will be, I've seen marvelous opening homilies by Father Bill Byrne, by Father Mike at St. Camilla's. So that might be your launch. But as you prepare for that, you want to set up a meeting where volunteers can come after the homily to join the ministry. So you may want to advertise that, identify a facilitator ahead of time, have sign-up tables, displays in the vestibule after the homily so people can sign up. Hopefully, as people come to their first meeting, they will want training. This is a ministry where training is essential. Now, the other thing that happens when people come to that first meeting, we saw this at Our Lady of Mercy. We had 40 people come. People are so anxious and ready. How can I get involved? What needs to be done next? So one of the resources that's available to you as part of this webinar is I have a checklist that we're using at Our Lady of Mercy. Here are some of the different ways, the different subcommittees, the different steps that we can take. And you'll notice that under volunteer management, we need to set up training. That is one of our key next steps. So as you begin your ministry, remember that to be survivor-focused requires preparation. We need training. We need training about how to serve people who are suffering trauma, how to help people who need to think about their safety. And you may have you probably do have local and state programs that you can tap into. In every parish that I've worked in, we've had volunteers who go to the state domestic violence 40-hour comprehensive training program. We have people who go to the House of Ruth, to other local training programs can help you as well. But you'll want to have some training programs at your own church. Now this picture is an example of work that we did at St. Mark's in Hyattsville, where the social concerns adopted domestic violence ministry as one of their key issues, and they did training. They had a workshop about healthy relationships for parishes as part of their domestic violence ministry. If you'll turn the page, or turn the slide, as we advance in our domestic violence ministry, in the midst of training, more leaders will come forward, and you can update your vision, and you can evaluate what services are possible. Now this is a picture of a domestic violence ministry flower. The outreach committee insisted they wanted to do a program at the school. So we are planning a peace poll here, reflecting that in the school we had a number of programs for the children about conflict resolution and peace as part of the domestic violence ministry, and this was for children. So you're going to widen the initial research, let the ministry flower. Almost every ministry for domestic violence is going to include outreach and education. So there's so much that you can do with prayers of the faithful, the bulletin inserts, restroom notices. I invite you to go to Google St. Camilla's bulletin, because they have done a series of different bulletin inserts about domestic violence, including the sacristan for St. Camilla's wrote out a testimony of her own experience of domestic violence. And this was a part of the inserts that they had for bulletin inserts. So as we go on, After outreach and education, if you are 14 years and you have people who want to do direct service to survivors, you can consider forming intake committees. Now, we have an intake committee at St. Camilla's. I want to encourage you that this is a wonderful way for parishioners to gain a great deal of training and then offer support and encouragement as Catholics to Catholic survivors who come in. Now, this group does not provide counseling. They offer listening. They offer referrals. They encourage everyone they see to go for professional counseling. They refer people. But I've just seen that sometimes people are so blessed by being welcomed and encouraged by their own parishioners who say, we're here to accompany you. If you have a challenge, we're going to try to help you solve that challenge. We're here for you. Now, this is a special ministry because you will be walking sometimes with women who choose to stay for many reasons. It's too dangerous to leave. He's threatened to kill her parents if she leaves. There are many different reasons why women stay, including they believe that marriage is forever, even if it involves their injury and death. So sometimes in parishes we are accompanying, we're caring for people who are staying in abusive relationships. On the other hand, sometimes we're staying with women and men who come forward and are seeking help to find a safer life. And so we're accompanying people as they leave. And meanwhile, we're doing education and outreach for the parish as a whole. So if you have an intake committee, you're going to want to have higher levels of training, resource packets. We are also doing on-site visits, networking. We actually go to domestic violence court hearings and sit and listen there. And we go to the Family Justice Center. And we have volunteers that go to the house, that have gone to the House of Ruth to actually learn on site about their services. Intake volunteers would also need to have monthly meetings, mentoring, trauma support. In both parishes where we're doing intakes at St. Camilla's and we're thinking about that Our Lady of Mercy, in both cases we have a volunteer counselor who's providing backup support for volunteers, because volunteers themselves are going to need a great deal of support. As you're thinking about this, I want you to remember to check into that Chicago Archdiocese Domestic Violence Program model, because they have wonderful information about how you where you can start first in your parish ministry with outreach and education, and then possibly offering more services. In Chicago, they go even further than intake. They also have counseling that their Catholic Charities provides on site in parishes. So that's a very wonderful model. I'd like to give you a little bit more information about our model at Catholic Charities in the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. Our team is available. We have parish service projects, and this is how I come to work with parishes that are developing domestic violence ministries. The priest, on the parish side, if you look on the left, the priest has to approve. We need volunteers or a plan to get volunteers and train them. There needs to be a budget. There need to be goals. So the parish thinks about their part, and then Catholic Charities DC offers, if it's needed, up to 60 hours of staff training and organizing help, economic support up to $8,000, networking. We will network our domestic violence teams with other parishes, other programs, and we help create training opportunities for those volunteers, either on site or as we network with others. So that was just a little bit about our structure. And as one of my final slides here, I would like to bring you to my list of resources. I think Sharon resources, so you can see that both Sharon and I included our as well. Resources. abuse. And she said, when I'm at Mass, God speaks to my conscience. God is telling me that this situation is not safe, not right. And I need help to get to a safer place. And I wish for you that if in your parish, and we know that approximately 1 out of 4 women, so 1 out of 4 women sitting in the pews in your parish, that if some of those women feel God's calling to find a safer place, that you will be ready to move ahead because you have a domestic violence ministry at your parish. So thank you so much for participating with us today. I'm so glad to be here with Sharon and Scott and family from Catholic Charities USA. And we're here now to open for your questions. And we look forward to a dialogue now. And thank you for your participation so far.
We're very grateful. Well, and to those benefits of everyone.
No, but those are 2 key things. To never recommend that someone leave. We don't tell people what to do. We give people alternatives, options. We support their own search for safety. And then we never recommend or do couple counseling when there's abuse, because the abuser will use that counseling time to justify his side, effectively shutting her down in the counseling session. She, on the other hand, will say, you know, we've talked with survivors who've gone to counseling. Did you tell the counselor that you were a domestic abuse victim? And she said, no. You know, they will not be able to speak in front of the abuser. So separate counseling is the best thing to do. I think another error is to think that we can just accept all volunteers into the ministry. Right at the beginning, we need to set up a volunteer management person. Maybe that's a staff person, maybe that's 1 or 2 key leaders, or a volunteer management team. We're just going to say, you know, we're going to interview people as they want to volunteer, because sometimes people are coming forward and they are actually in domestic abuse currently, but they want to help someone else. Well, there's some other issues they need to deal with their own abuse situation before becoming a volunteer. Sometimes we have people come forward who've survived domestic abuse, but the challenge is they may almost feel like a volcano. They may be triggered. They may talk about their own experience when trying to help someone else, in which case they're not quite ready. So, but there are other people that are going to come forward who survived domestic abuse. They have gone through counseling themselves. They are ready to help. And you're going to have professionals come forward and well-meaning people. You just need a volunteer screen for this ministry. I think another difficulty is be sure that you don't skip the training phase of domestic violence ministry. You've got to bring in domestic violence professionals in your community who talk to you about safety planning, who talk to you about the services. Go visit the programs. Do that background research before you start offering, before you launch your ministry.
Before we take the next question, I want to reinforce Laura's point. The domestic abuse can look like just a difficult marriage. It can look like a marital spat, but it's much like being a specialist who can tell the difference between, you know, a type of cancer. It's like, yeah, you know, we don't have to worry about that one. That's just regular. But sometimes oftentimes actually, what makes something abusive is not obvious to people. For example, oftentimes parish leaders, not oftentimes, we won't use oftentimes, sometimes,
No, it's true.
sometimes the most polite, diplomatic parish leader is actually abusive at home. So we like working with our expert colleagues. So, but there's another question. What's another one?
Yes, and this is from one of our participants, Richard Espinal, and you've been unmuted if you would like to ask our presenters your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I had a couple of questions, but I guess the first one is, when I cry for help is, like a lot of the bishop's statements on social justice issues, is a very well-kept secret. And so I'm wondering what is being done to promote the document and the guidance that it gives. And then the other, I guess the second half of that question relates to what's being done in the seminaries, marriage preparation programs, because in my experience, too many are still emphasizing, especially when it comes to married couples, the sanctity of marriage and kind of counseling folks to stay together and overlooking the safety of the victim. And so if you could just speak to that a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. This is Sharon. We completely support the sanctity of marriage, and that is indeed the question. As Pope Francis and many people at the Synod emphasize, violence has no place in a marriage. So you either have a marriage going on or you have an abusive situation. So there is a way to get from an abusive situation to a sacramental, sacred marriage, but it requires work. So just to clarify, we're all on the same page. But if you don't have a marriage going on, then you have to acknowledge what is going on. The other point is you asked how are we promoting this well-kept secret about when I call for help. It was published back in 1992. So our initiative, Catholics for Family Peace, we promoted extensively in all of our programs. And the bishop's office has a wonderful For Your Marriage website where it's where it's promoted. We probably go to 20 conferences a year where it's promoted. So if you have some specific ideas about how we can promote it more, we would appreciate it. And I think there was a third aspect to your question about maybe seminary training. So we are actually our initiative. That's one of the things we do is we provide education, training, and consultation. And so you're right. It's not in every seminary, but give us 10 years and it will be.
At a recent training, this is Laura speaking, at a recent training that we had at Catholic Charities, we sponsored a priest training at Catholic University. Mm-hmm. The priest asked the same question. And one of the presenters said, domestic violence does provide a ground for annulment, that the seeds of domestic violence can usually be found that predate the marriage. That inclination of abuse, the lack of equality, that there are seeds that can be pointed to. At Catholic Charities, we are concerned that we do need to work on this issue and help educate. We need more education in seminaries, and we welcome those priests. There's so many priests who are very interested in this issue and wanting more guidance themselves because they are facing this issue. So it's a very important question.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one final question. And again, both of our presenters have made their emails available. So if there is a matter that you didn't feel comfortable submitting or comes to you later, they are certainly available to assist you. But the final question is coming from Gladys Gonzalez. Are you with us? Gladys Gonzalez? Okay, I'll go ahead and read her question because it's a very good one. Oh, you're here. Yes.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, we had offered a question about the abuser who often attends Mass and is linked to the victim at church, or I mean, how do you deal with the ministry of the victim when you're dealing with the abuser who seems to be there as well all the time?
Mm-hmm. Well, we know the abusers are the fathers, the husbands, the grandfathers who are sitting in the... So as we speak about this issue, we are inviting families to seek, greater, better communication. We're inviting them to come and seek healing. But when they come when we are dealing with people individually in the office, I have had abusers come in and say, okay, so where's my wife? And the church has to make her forgive because that's what we're Catholic. She has to forgive me, so make her come back. So that is a situation where we then encourage, we know because of our advanced research where the abuser counseling programs are. And we encourage that person to go for counseling, and we also educate them about the role of the church. We're here to support families, and we don't give out any information to the abuser about his wife or any information ever about what she said or what she disclosed. We maintain complete confidentiality. But we encourage the abuser to go for help himself. On my web page, the Catholic Charities DC/Family Peace website, we have some materials too that are for abusers. I've had someone say to me in a meeting, I didn't realize until our meetings together that I myself am an abuser. What can I do to help my own family? And there are excellent materials for men to read about how they can bring healing and health to themselves. But professional counseling will be the key to that recovery.
And just to, another practical technique would be to recommend that they attend different masses. And thank goodness there generally are at least 3 masses in most parishes. If we could also direct you to, it happens to be on our website, Catholics for Family Peace, but the Diocese of Paterson, New Jersey, they have developed a diocesan-wide policy about how to respond to domestic violence cases in their schools and in their church. So they have excellent guidelines. So.
And thank you both. And I recognize that some people may need to ring off at this time. We want to honor your time, but both of our presenters have agreed to stay on because there are a number of questions. And so anyone who wishes to remain on the webinar may do so and benefit from the responses to these additional questions. Now, are we unmuting people? Yes, we have a question from Patricia Walsh, and you are unmuted, and you are welcome to ask your question live. And she may not be on the line. Actually, from a different individual, we have a question, and this is good. And if you could actually scroll up. And it's a concern that somebody's experience is that there's little knowledge of domestic abuse and feels like everything is geared for people who want to leave. You know, and the experience is that priests in the confessional recommend marital counseling. A Catholic marital counselor ignored concern that there was abuse. The question is to encourage people who are encouraging starting this ministry to do so. And I think related to this is there sometimes ignorance on the part of church leaders, and is there sometimes resistance on the part of parish leaders in developing a response to this?
Laura has much more information about this, but I do want to say that we know from research that the fact of the matter is most people stay, for any number of reasons, but most people stay. So there is an entire thought process around how to help people stay and be safe. And let me underscore that we are not suggesting whether they leave or stay or whatever. I mean, that is very much an individual decision. But how to stay safe is something families have been doing for over 2,000 years. but Laura, while you're thinking of your response, if people go to the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence, they actually have some good information about how to stay and be safe. So the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence. But Laura, what else would you add about this issue?
When I had the opportunity to work in the Diocese of Columbus for St. Joseph in Dover, Ohio, we knew that many of the families, in the last year that I was there were 45 families that disclosed that they were experiencing domestic abuse at home. Most of those families stayed together. And so in our ministry, what we tried to do was try to provide services whenever those families came forward and they needed help with something. We tried to provide services to them. If we had to triage or provide, because we had so many people asking for help, we definitely tried to provide services to those families, any kind of service that we could to help them. I think sometimes priests and volunteer leaders are learning that this is a specialized field, and that's why I said even our intake volunteers who go through training don't do counseling. That what we want to do is train priests, staff, and volunteers how to recognize domestic abuse, and then also train them where to refer people. Because if your first contact is a friendly church person who gets you to a domestic violence program, you'll get most likely the kind of counseling and support that is needed.
Great.
Good. And we have a question from Mr. Glenn Leach. If you would care to, you're unmuted.
I didn't really have a question. It was just simply a statement that sometimes evidence of domestic abuse shows up in some of the most unexpected places. I was participating in the parents' evening for a Valuing Your Sexuality session that we put on at our parish for adolescents. And during this session, we have a opportunity for the parents, just as the kids do during the regular sessions, to submit a blind question for discussion to the question box. And one question came up: what do you do when your marriage has gone from troubled to violent?
Wow. How important. You know, one of the things we did at Our Lady of Mercy just recently is Father Bill asked all of the staff for the church, and I'm working with another parish now that's going to have the staff for the school, to widen the circle of people who have access to training. So have training for priests, have training for your staff, have training for volunteers, so that more and more people in the parish have a training. I've gone into parish councils and done a training. What are the local agencies that can most help? So that more and more people in your parish together create a safe place where anyone, a child, a grandmother, a family, can reveal they're experiencing domestic abuse, and someone, a staff person, a teacher, a volunteer leader, will be able to recognize it. We had a priest recently tell me about a situation. He said he was counseling a young couple, and the young wife said that at a time when her husband was angry, he injured their cat on purpose. And the priest said to me, my gosh, now that I'm thinking about that, was that a sign of domestic abuse? This is a young couple. The young woman is about to become a mother. She's pregnant. And he has injured intentionally the cat so much she had to take the cat to the vet. We should be able to recognize that. This family needs help. Anytime you're damaging pets or punching the wall, you are saying to the other members of the family who should be beloved members that actually, I might do that to you next.
Thank you. Here's a very practical question from Sister Lisa Bergeron, who I will say is a member of our Parasocial Ministry leadership team responsible for this webinar. Sister Lisa, are you, you're unmuted if you'd like to ask your question. And
her question was a good one. It's what's a reasonable timeline for setting up this process? And please expect to take 6 months in your preparation and planning before you launch your official opening to the parish. Get your research done, get your staff trained. The same week that we did our first training for the staff at Our Lady of Mercy, they had a phone call come in with a domestic violence case. They had a grandmother come in with a domestic violence case the very same week. So that you need to do several months of preparation.
We have a question from a gentleman, John Bangert. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Would you care to ask your question yourself?
Yes, thank you. I was interested in whether or not you have any experience with teen programs within parishes that are aimed at actually preventing domestic abuse before marriage. I know you talked a little bit about marriage prep programs, but how about in youth ministry?
Yeah. So this is Sharon. Thanks for that question. We actually think that prevention is the easiest way to go. So we would ask people on the webinar for help in terms of if you know any good teen dating programs. in this area, we tend to, we work closely with our Jewish colleagues, and if you were to Google JCADA, Jewish Coalition Against Domestic Abuse, they have a wonderful teen dating awareness program. It's called AWARE, A-W-A-R-E, but they put a lot of focus on healthy relationships, and they have found that to be very productive. So to the extent that some of our high school and youth ministries do emphasize healthy dating, that would be important. If you could find a way to talk about chastity that the kids would relate to, that would be really helpful. But the whole business of you know, as young people, understanding how to treat each other well. So I don't have an example except for my Jewish colleagues, but Laura might. But that is the way to go. If you have anything to do with teens, focusing on healthy dating relationships is the key.
And that is one of the things that we did at St. Mark's in Hyattsville. We brought in an excellent Catholic counselor who had a great presentation style, and he did kind of an interactive workshop with, we had about 50 people from the parish attend, healthy relationships for teenagers.
Good.
Invite people to come and talk about it.
Great.
Great. Thank you. We have a question from Ruth Marie Shea Atala. Would you care to ask your question yourself? Ruth Marie Atala? Well, I'll go ahead because it's a very important question. Please elaborate on the psychological abuse elements such as belittling, bullying, limiting personal freedom, etc. I noticed that the form danger assessment, those are in caps, does not elaborate upon this.
Just one of our downloads.
Ah, okay.
Thanks. We might both answer this. So the first part, well, actually the second part. So the danger assessment is very much, it's a research-based entity, and it can tell with pretty much like 94% accuracy as to whether this day, under these circumstances, whether the survivor is likely to be killed. So it's very much about, it lists usually 11 to 20 questions which are directly known to be related to fatality. So I think that kind of explains why it doesn't focus on the psychological part. But on the, I'm looking at the Center for Disease Control's definition, which we will send this link. But let me grab the first part of the question. You want to know more about psychological aggression? What was it exactly?
Right, kind of elaborate on it.
Okay. All right. So we would contend. So psychological aggression is like the groundwork for physical aggression. You know, I mean, if you can call someone names and belittle them and not realize that, not accept that they are a child of God, then it's just one more step to hitting them. And you know, name calling and insulting, humiliating people. I think you asked about the the limited access to funds. You know, sometimes so I'm in my parents' generation. You know, the fact that the mother kept track of the money and it might have been kept in envelopes or whatever. I mean, there was this system about what we did about money. I mean, it's not so much that, well, the point is it's the control. It's whether one person limits access to the other. Yeah. So, but Laura, you might want to add to that. But
well, in the danger assessment, there are some questions that relate to psychological abuse. A good one is, has he threatened to commit suicide? Has he asked you, as the survivor, to commit suicide? So one of the psychological abuse cases that we had referred to us at Catholic Charities was a young woman, and her husband would say to her, I think you should commit suicide. Your life is worthless. I want to see your brain smeared across our refrigerator. Now, as I said that, probably you felt sick And imagine if that was your beloved husband saying that to you over and over and over again. So actually some of the things on that danger assessment, which you can download and take a look at, are psychological abuse. You know, another form of abuse that we haven't discussed, but I think of as psychological, is sabotaging your ability to work through phone calls to the workplace. Or we had a case of a young woman who, when she had a job, he would think of excuses to require her to stay at home and threaten to beat her if she went to work. So she missed work, and then when she was at work, he would call. And so now she has this very bad employment history. So there's all sorts of abuse that don't involve the fist connecting with your jaw, but are terribly devastating for your psyche and your self-worth.
Great. We have a question from Isabel Salazar. Do you care to ask that? Well, I'll go ahead and read it. In most of the families where there is domestic violence, the main problem is the abuser. I believe that if we provide help to the main root, the main problem, this will not only help the abuser, but also the rest of the family. I would like to offer the same program and information to our Spanish-speaking community.
So thank you very much for this question. I invite you and anyone who's working in the Spanish community who would like some domestic violence resources in Spanish, please send me an email. I would be delighted to send you my favorite resources. I agree with you that it's essential that we go into a variety of communities. At St. Camilla's, we've started in the English committee. We're working now in a Spanish committee. And then next year, we're hoping to approach the French parishioners speaking French as well.
And we totally agree with your thesis that the point would be to solve the root problem, and the root problem is the person who's using abuse. It becomes problematic because they tend to not recognize that it's abusive, and they tend to not be willing to, they're not interested in being helped. In the meantime, we have all these vulnerable people who are being hurt. However, one of our colleagues, so again, if you look at Catholics for Family Peace, well, her name should be up, but Laura made reference to her before. Dr. Welland, W-E-L-L-A-N-D, W-E-L-L-A-N-D. So she has a nonprofit. It's called Peace in the Family, except it's in French. I mean, it's in Spanish. And she has an extensive background working with abusers, and actually, you know, people have changed. So we, I mean, we are a resurrection people. We do believe that people can change. They kind of have to show some indication that they're willing to do so. But yeah, we love your thesis. I harp on that all the time. Thanks.
Great. And we have an individual who wishes to ask a question. Vicki Lott, if you're on, please ask your question.
Down.
You had your hand raised on the screen for a question. Vicki Lott.
Let's go.
So she's not available. Do we have any other questions? I think we're. I'm sorry. Where's it? Yeah, I think we're. And then just one final comment from one of our participants. Which may resonate with others. There it is. Oh, wait. Let's go to this question, because I think this is important. Today's epistle was from St. Paul and includes the passage, quote, the wife being subject to the husband. How can we deal with biblical passages such as this?
Thank you for asking that question. It was on my list to bring up. Actually, so if you read that entire chapter and verse, it makes it very clear that husbands are to treat their wives like Christ treats the church. So think it's a pretty clear message that, you know, so a husband would die for his family. He would sacrifice for his family. He would only do what is best for his family. What I think would be interesting is to take that chapter and verse, and with, you know, if the person's still on the phone about, you know, healthy teen dating relationships, I think every, like, preteen or twin, whatever they call them, you know, before they start dating, it would be really useful to examine, you know, to work through that whole chapter and verse and realize what we are being called to as men and women in a relationship. Because when you read the entire thing, it's like, oh, okay, this is, you know, we're talking about a husband being willing to die for his wife. So that's one response. The other response is, thank goodness this book, When I Call for Help, the Bishop's Statement, is readily available on all of our websites, including their website. And they have a nice little paragraph about how it's called Scripture and Church Teachings, and how one needs to read this properly. You cannot take one line out of a 20-verse chapter. And so I hope that helps. But Laura, did you want to add anything to it? No, okay.
Well, thank you again to both of our presenters, Dr. Sharon O'Brien and Laura Yeomans, both of whom are making themselves available to assist you in your ministries in this area in any way. We are grateful for your participation and pray for every blessing upon your efforts to address this issue in your agencies or in your parishes or in whatever situation that you minister. Recall that there are handouts being available to you on this webinar with so much of the information that has been presented, and the Parish Social Ministry Leadership Team of Catholic Charities USA is very grateful for your participation, and we'd like you to know that this is the first in a series of webinars. The next webinar will be in February, and it will be on parish social ministry and advocacy, which we think will be always very timely, but especially timely as we will be welcoming a new administration, and there will likely be many things to advocate about. So God bless you all, and hope you'll be able to join us in February.